Hello, good morning. It's Monica from Life is Art, and this is the Sunday 10 a.m. technique at the Epic 90s birthday celebration online crop. Just moving my sign out of the way there, and just making sure we're all in the frame before we get started. If you're joining me live, just say hello or howdy so I know you're here. And if you're watching later on replay, you can say replay. All right. I'm just trying to see if I can see how to get my comments going in the same spot as my video, but I'm not that technologically inclined. I will have to play with it. Good morning, Mom. I see you're watching. And hello, Robin. Good morning. Good morning. Everybody's up bright and early on a Sunday. And we are going to be looking at the featured collection for the month of January, which is the Let's Party collection. You'll find it in the new January-February catalog. And if you didn't have a chance to join me for the catalog launch party, you can find that on my linked onto my Facebook business page, and you can check out all the crafting and walkthrough and everything that happened then. So today we're going to be using a little bit of the pattern paper. We're going to use some coordinating cardstock. And we're also going to be using something else that's featured for the month of January. And that is the January stamp of the month. It's called Looking Forward. And this is another one of those stamps of the month that is available with thin cuts. And let me just bring it up a little bit closer. You'll notice there's a bit of sort of note paper or making a list, and there's some shadowing around it that has sort of that torn notebook look. So that is part of the thin cut to get that look. You get this dark lined part as the stamp, and then this is the thin cut. So again, there's a thin cut for this and this and this. So the way that the stamp of the month works is that you can purchase this stamp of the month with the thin cuts for $40.50, or you can get just the stamp of the month for $27 from Close to My Heart. If you place an order during the month of January that totals $60 or more before tax and shipping and all that fun stuff, then you can get it for the reduced price of $20.25 with the thin cuts, or $6.75 just as the stamp. Now, if you're a VIP and you put in the same order, $60 or more during January, if you're a VIP customer, then you get the stamp for free and you just pay the extra for the thin cut. So lots of good options there. So we're going to be using that, and we're actually going to be using a lot of those stamps on this project. And I think it's a really fun project that we're going to do today. Hey, Robin, nice to see you're watching. I see Heather's here too. Hello, hello. This project is a card. Yes. So the style of the item we're making is a card. However, this is going to be a card for us. Have you ever made a card and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so nice. I can't give it away. I want to keep it forever because I'm so proud of myself and I made such a lovely card. And so I don't want to give it away because then I won't be able to look at it. So if you've ever said that, this is the card for you because this is a card for you to keep. Now, the same card style can be used to make a card to give to somebody, or you could make this same project and give it to somebody as a gift. But for today, this is a gift for you. So we're going to be making a slider pop-out card. And there are lots of card styles that are called a slider pop-out card. So you're going to have to kind of bear with me while we get through the project to be able to see what I mean by a slider pop-out card. We're starting with a card base of Sundance, and this is the light side of the Sundance. If I fold it over, you'll see that the dark side is there as well. But we're going to use the light side. I want it to be just a little bit bright and cheerful and sunny, and I find the other side is a little bit more orangey, which is nice. It kind of morphs between the two. But for this, I want to have the more yellowy, bright side. And this piece is 4¼ inches by 10 inches. So 4¼ by 10. Now, if you are the kind of person who says, "Ooh, I'm gonna make that too," don't worry about for your furiously scribbling down everything. When I post the pictures of the completed project, I will include the dimensions down at the bottom of the information. So this is a 4¼ by 10-inch piece, and along the 10-inch side, we're going to do some scoring. So let's line it up here on our Versamat or in your scoreboard. Grab our scoring tools. And we're going to start scoring at 1¼ inches. So along this 10-inch side, we're scoring at 1¼ just like that. Then we're going to score at 2½ So 2½ line it up nice and neat. And we're going to do several score lines. And when I'm doing several score lines along my Versamat, I need to keep an eye on this corner to make sure that as I'm scoring, my paper isn't slowly shifting down on this end. I've noticed that on other projects. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. Now, we've done 2½. We're going to go to 3¾ So 3¾ If you want an easy way to remember, every single one of these score lines is 1¼ apart. So we started at 1¼ and then we're just bumping 1¼ every time. So that was 3¾ Then we're going to go to 5 inches. Line it up, 5 inches. And then after 5 inches, we're going to do 6¼ because it's 1¼ after. And then we're going to do 7½. I'm just watching my corner there, looking good so far. 7½. And then the last one is at 8¾ So 8¾ Lining it up. And there we go. Okay, now we need to do a couple marks here. So we've got our 1¼ 2½, 3¾ 5 inches, 6¼ 7½, and 8¾ So we need to go to our 5-inch line. So 1¼ 2½. So this is our 5-inch line, our score line. And I'm going to line it up here on my Versamat like that. So this is my 5-inch line. I'm going to keep my finger there and I'm going to grab a pencil, because what I want to mark along this 5-inch line is I want to mark at 5/8. So 5/8 is halfway between a 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch. So I'm just going to put my pencil right there so I can line it up. And then I'm going to come to my 5-inch line and I'm just going to make a little pencil mark, just a little tick, so I know where 5/8 is. And then we're going to come across here and we're going to mark it at 3 5/8. So we're going to go to the 3, then we're going to go to 3½, and then halfway between the 1/2 and the 3/4 is our 5/8. So we're going to line that up, and we're going to make another little tick on that 5-inch score line. So if I hold it up this way, we came in 5/8 inch from this edge and 5/8 inch in from that edge. And we've made a little horizontal tick. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to do a little bit of cutting along that. If you have a paper trimmer that will allow you to accurately cut that, you can just go ahead and do it in your paper trimmer. I do not. So I am going to use my ruler, which is why I have a nice shiny metal ruler that I'm sure blinds you all when I use it, and my X-Acto blade. Now, we're going to cut between our 2 pencil marks, but I also want to make it like a slot, not just a slit. Do you know the difference between a slot and a slit? A slot is where there's a gap in between, and a slit is where there's just a cut. So what we're going to do is we're going to get really close to that 5-inch line, and it's hard for me with all the lights to see my score line. we're going to get really close to that, and we're going to cut just slightly to the left of it, just ever so slightly. We're not making a huge slot. We're just making a bigger slit than a slit. And then we're going to go just a little bit, like a millimeter, to the right. And that will put us just slightly on the other side of that score line. And I'm going to cut down there. And then I don't even really need my ruler for this. I'm just going to come where my pencil marks are and just push my X-Acto blade in. And there we go. So we have created, I'm sure you can see that there because the black is showing through from my Versamat. We've created a slot, but a very tiny slot. And that is going to allow our card to work a little better. You could do it as a slit, but if you're going to make a card like I am, I'm adding a few extra pieces of paper, and we need that little bit of a buffer for the card to work. So keep that in mind when you're creating this kind of card, and you're all looking at me going, which kind of card is it we're making? It's not so clear yet. All right, I'm going to come in with a piece of scrap paper. Maybe I'll turn it this way. And I'm going to have my slot here. What I want to do, maybe, is erase my pencil markings. That would be a good first step. Erase those. We don't need them anymore. There we go. What I want to do is I want to come in with my stamp set, and there's this lovely stamp down here at the bottom that says New Moments, New Memories, New Adventures. And I've got it loaded up on my big, long, skinny block. I want to make sure I've got it the right way up. I've seasoned it just by rubbing it on my hand or my arm. And what I'm going to do is just on this 1 1/4 inch section below my slot, I want to do some tone-on-tone stamping. So I've got my Sundance ink here. I'm going to open that up, turn it this way because that'll be the easiest way to ink this large stamp. And because we've got such lovely words going across, there's enough room here for me to stamp 3 rows of these words. And there are 3 sentiments on here. So the first time I stamp it, I'm going to ink it all up. This is why we have the scrap paper underneath. And I'm going to line it up so that the New Moments is at the edge, so that we get all of the words for New Moments on there. Okay, then I'm going to ink it up again, and this time I'm going to move it all the way to the other way so that the last word, the New Adventures, gets all stamped on there. Then I'm going to ink it up a 3rd time. Pardon me, choking on my own words. And now I'm going to line this up in the space that's left before the score line with the word that we haven't yet emphasized, which is the center one, in the center. So the New Memories. So let me lift that up so hopefully you can get a good look at that. So we did the New Moments right on this edge, New Adventures on this edge, and then the center one in there. And then it looks a little bit like all over stamping. It's not just bump, 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 lined up the exact same. Okay? Now I can't see whether you guys can see what I'm looking at because I can't see the video. So hopefully we're still in focus. Looks good so far. Alrighty, now we're going to turn it around so that we've got our slot here and we've got our space below our slot. And instead of stamping it, just continuing on up, we're going to turn it around because this card has 2 different sides. So we want our words to be the right direction for each side. And now we're just going to repeat that same process. So we're going to ink up our stamp. We're going to stamp the New Moments right on the left-hand side, like that. We're going to ink it up again. We're going to stamp the New Adventures on the right-hand side. And then we're going to ink it up a 3rd time. And we're going to make sure the New Memories is in the middle. There we go. Looking good. All right, let's give this a wash off stamp chamois. I actually went and got my stamp chamois wet before we started. Usually I forget. So I can wash my stamps. And yes, my scissors are sitting there, so they decided to come along with the magnetic ride. So there, you can see why we wanted that piece of scrap paper under there to collect all the extra edge inking. Okay, so now that we've completed that, we need to start doing a little bit of decorating on here. And so we just have to decide which side is our front and our back. It makes no difference unless you made a boo-boo with your stamping and you want to have one side in particular on the front or the back. But the next piece that I want to bring in is a piece of the Limeade cardstock. And again, this is on the light side of the Limeade. And it has been cut to 4 1/8 by 1 1/8. And I had to get that specific with this cutting. I know some of you don't like the 8ths, but the stamp that I'm using for this is the one that says Beautiful New Beginnings. This one here, Beautiful New Beginnings, with the lovely little sparkles. And it needed to be the maximum amount of space in order to fit on this section of the card. So that's why we had to go with that particular measurement. All right, so we're going to ink up our stamp, and I'm using Limeade ink for this. Limeade? Am I using Limeade? I might be using Jade. Jade, sorry. Jade ink. I knew there was something wrong about that statement. And I'm going to bring this a little bit closer to me. Hopefully we're still in the camera so that I can line this up and stamp in the center. There we go. Lovely. We can wash that off. Good. And set that aside. Done with that. So this is now going to go in this next 1 1/4 inch section below where we did the stamping. So let's add some adhesive on here. Like that. You know what? I'm going to grab my... I like to use this to help me peel the backings off. Then I don't end up bending my card. I find I bend the cardstock when I try to peel it off any other way. And then we're going to center that in the middle of that 1 1/4 inch section, just like that. And then on the back side, so on this side, we're going to turn it around. Now remember, every time we want to do something on the other side, we're going to want to turn it around so that things don't end up upside down. I've got a piece of this lovely pattern paper from the Let's Party collection, and this is 4 inches by 1 inch. Yes, it's a little bit smaller than this because I didn't need to try and fit something on it. So I went with an easier measurement. So 4 inches by 1 inch. If what you were putting on the front of your card was not so big, you could do the same, 4 inch by 1 inch. But I was maximizing space for that stamp. And we're going to center this in the middle of this section, this 1 1/4 inch panel. There we go. And that's all for the base of our card. Now we have this slot in here, and for this slot we need something to go through it. And so I've got another piece of Sundance, and this piece has been cut to 2 3/4 by 5 1/2. So 2 3/4 by 5 1/2. And we're going to decorate the front side first. So we've got another piece of that beautiful pattern paper, and this has been cut to 2 1/2 by 5 1/4. We're just going to go ahead and stick this down. Now this card, I'm not making it look like a birthday card or necessarily a celebration card of any kind. You will find out why. You will find out. So I didn't necessarily want the confetti sprinkles, but I do like this squares pattern. So we can line this up inside that card, and we're creating this on the vertical. So you notice that this is a 5.5-inch piece of cardstock, and our other piece is a 4.5-inch wide. So when this is all done, it's going to fit inside of a standard envelope because it will be 4.25 by 5.5, which is awesome. We like being able to do that. All right, now our next bit is to do a little bit of stamping, and I've got that lovely, almost sort of award-like stamped image to stamp here. It says, "The best is yet to come," and it's got a little butterfly on there, and it kind of looks a little bit springy, so I think that's kind of cool because it's not springy right now. And I'm going to use my Bluebird ink for this, which is also one of the lovely coordinating colors with this collection. I've seasoned it up, hopefully well enough, and because I've used it a couple times, so I'm just going to ink up that stamp. Looks good. I'm going to stamp it out. Now, I did not purchase my stamp set, my stamp of the month, with the thin cuts. I just got the stamp. And so I'm going to require myself to do some fussy cutting. And I know that's a big leap for me, but you know, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to fussy cut out this stamped image. So first thing we're going to do is rough cut all the way around like that. And then we're going to come in and start cutting. So we're going to leave a little bit of a white border around our stamped image, and we're just doing lots of pivoting, going in and out those scallops, all the little scalloped edge. All the way around. Now, if you're not a fussy cutter and this just looks like a waste of time to you, then you could get a circles thin cut and probably get a size that would work and just cut a circle around this. You could totally do that. Nobody would say no. You use what you have. I have the skill of fussy cutting. Other people have the skill of die cutting. So we're going all the way around. And if you purchase the stamp set with the die cut, obviously that's the easiest way to die cut around. However, the next step would not work with the die cut from the set, not necessarily. So the next step is that we're going to take this image and we're going to put it on top of this lovely candy apple red. And to do this, we're going to use liquid glue. Now, you don't often see me using liquid glue, but because of the motion of this card, we need to make sure that these two pieces are very well adhered and there's no little edges that want to stick out. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to glue that down to the candy apple. We're going to give it just a minute to kind of get dried on there, stuck down good. And then we're going to rough cut this out. So we're going to go around all the way. Don't worry, we're going to use some of this for another bit of the project. We're not wasting. And then we're going to do the same process, only this time instead of leaving a halo of white, we're leaving a halo of red. And I find that this is a fun process that makes a stamped image really stand out, really makes it a focal point. I often do this with titles too, where I'll have 2, even 3 layers of cardstock. You could even add a layer of glitter paper. You just have to make sure that it dries really well. Now, for this particular card, I wouldn't recommend glitter paper because it's a lot more bulky than cardstock. And remember, we are working with the size of slot that we created. And so if you go too thick, your card is not going to function the way it's supposed to. I'm already pushing it with the few layers that I'm going to be adding onto this card. There we go. And then we need to stick this down to our card. So what I'm going to do is, again, use lots of glue. I say I'm using lots of glue. I'm not putting gobs of glue, but I'm making sure that I'm getting good coverage, and I'm making little circles with my glue so that it gets into those little curves of the scalloped edge and then all the way around. So very thin layer of glue. I don't even know if you can see it, but now in order to make sure that this will fit inside the card and it'll be where I want it when it's in its upright position, I'm going to line up on my Versamat, hopefully before all my glue dries, and I'm going to come up 1¼ inches and kind of make my hand be a line. And then I'm going to take my stamped image and put it sort of centered from top to bottom in the rest of the space. So we're kind of blocking off that 1¼ inches at the bottom and then adding that. And now we want to make sure that this adheres really well, especially at the bottom. We don't want it to lift off of that base. And so we just take our time. If you had a Xyron, this would be a great time to use it to make sure you got adhesion everywhere that you possibly could. So there we go. We've created the front of this panel. Now we're going to flip to the back side of this panel. And of course we have the darker side of the Sundance showing, but we're going to bring in a piece of white daisy cardstock to go on to the back, and we're going to do a bit of stamping. So I need to switch out these two stamps here. I want to take this one off. And when I remove stamps from a carrier sheet or from my stamp block, I like to get one edge and then use my fingers to walk my stamp off, especially when it's brand new like this. It's got lots of good stick to the block, so you don't want to pull it and stretch it and put it under any undue pressure. So just walk it off nice and easily and then put it back on the carrier sheet. And then I want to get this one that looks like a list and walk it off the carrier sheet like that. I also like to lay it down on my Versamat instead of just laying it on my block. I like to lay it down on the Versamat, and that gives the stamp a second to kind of relax, because even though you're walking it and you're being careful, you could have pulled it a little bit this way or a little bit that way. I mean, it's acrylic, so it moves. And then we're going to make sure it's seasoned, and we're going to bring in our Bluebird ink again for this. We're going to go through that same process that we did last time. We're going to line it up on the Versamat, and we're going to envision that 1¼ inches. And in fact, I might even put this piece of paper across here at 1¼ because anything that's below that is not going to get seen. It's going to disappear forever. So you don't want anything important to be below there. If you make a boo-boo, it can be under there, no problem. All right, so we're going to ink up in the Bluebird. And then what I want to do is I want to kind of take this, and instead of putting it straight, we're going to make it a little bit funky. So we're going to put it on an angle like that. Lovely. Oops. We can wash our stamp off. Sometimes I pick up my stamp chamois to wash my stamp, and sometimes I just run my stamp over top of it. Totally depends. Sometimes if you squish too hard into your ink pad and you get the ink, in between the lines, then you can use your stamp chamois and really get in there and get that ink off. But if you haven't had that issue, then just running it over on the flat. This is the case that holds the stamp chamois. And I find that works just great. Just rub, and you're good to go. Okay, so now to add a little bit more to this, we can scooch this out of the way, make sure we've still got it the right way up. We're going to add some numbers on here. And on our carrier sheet, we have numbers 1 through 5. So I've got my little tiny acrylic block. I've got my blue ink. So I'm going to start with number 1. And these ones I will actually stick on the block this way, because if you try to stick them down, you're never going to pick them up well, I'm not going to say never, but they're hard. So now we're going to just number some of these. Now there are, I'm just going to give it a little wipe off with the stamp chamois. There are more spaces than numbers, and that is okay. We can have overflow. These are teeny tiny, so you want to make sure that as soon as you're done stamping with them, you put them back onto that carrier sheet. If you don't, good luck. So there's 1, 2. I do like that they left, because they're so tiny, they made the acrylic a square and then put the image. So it is a little square that it's sitting on, which helps. If you've ever used some of the really tiny alphabets, you know what I'm talking about. You know, you're trying to put an I or something on your block and it's just flopping one way or the other. So the little square does help, but it's just easier to get it on the block with your fingers than trying to pick it up with the block. Number 4. You could, of course, if this is too fiddly for you, you could just take a marker or a journal pen and write your numbers, but this isn't terrible. There we go, number 5. And then because we have a little bit of space left at the bottom, I'm going to come in with, let me see, will that fit on there? Yeah, I think it might. We're going to come in with this little swirly arrow. Yeah, if we put it on an angle, it'll fit. And let's switch up the color. We're going to go for the candy apple. Arrows are always, they seem more important when they're in red, right? You pay more attention. So we're going to ink up our little arrow. And let's stamp them on there like so. Give them a little wash. Yep, getting ink in the cracks. I think we've all done it, Robin. Especially if you've freshly re-inked an ink pad or it's a brand new ink pad and it's super juicy. It's really easy to push just a little too hard and all of a sudden you've got ink pooling inside all of those little crevices. Yep. And sometimes it affects your stamping and sometimes it doesn't, so it's hard to know, right? All right, so now I want to add a little extra something to this. So I've got another piece of the Limeade, and I'm using the light side again, just finding the one I want. And I've got the little arrow here that says goals. So we're going to ink that up in the Jade because we're doing our tone on tone stamping on the Limeade, and I'm going to actually have to turn it that way. So ink it up, stamp it down. There we go. We've got our goals. That'll come back in a minute. But we're done with it for now. This one we're going to fussy cut. And so this is not a hard one to fussy cut because it's just nice straight edges. And I just kind of curve around the points like that. We're going to use some of this paper for another piece of embellishing on here. So that's why I did it in the corner. Maximize my space so I can use it again. Okay, so we've got our goals on there. Let's add a little bit of thin foam tape to the back of this. Now, you have to be careful when you're adding foam tape to this sort of mechanism because you can't have anything with foam tape going through the slot. Remember our slot. We always have to keep the slot in mind. And so if you can't have anything with foam tape going through the slot, you need to make sure that whatever you're putting foam tape on is either higher than where it's going to be when your then your thing closes, or it needs to be on the front panels that we decorated on here. Okay, so keep those in mind. Now I know because I've made this before that if I put it right at the top, it will be okay. That part is always going to be outside the mechanism. Good morning, Allison. Nice to see you're watching. All right, so now that we've got that, we can attach it onto here. And you can probably start to see why I said this is a project for you. Not that you couldn't make it for someone else, but this is a project for you. This is the lovely stamp of the month for January, and it talks about new beginnings and setting goals and all that stuff. And I thought this would be a really fun project to have and to make for ourselves, that we could think about what are our goals for the year or the month, or, you know, for a certain project. Now, this won't go all the way to the bottom. Don't worry about that. This is never going to get seen. And in this blank space at the bottom here below our list of goals, and we put this really fancy arrow there, I was thinking that this could be, you know how some people choose a word for the year? Something that's going to be sort of their motto for the year. I thought that's something that we could add in that space. So that's why we left that like that. Okay, now it's time to start assembling our slider pop-out card. And the first thing we need to do is we need to do all of our creases. So we're going to turn this over to the back side, to the box side. We're going to fold, and we're going to make sure that that 5-inch crease is right in the center, and you may have to do special lining up because we've got that slot there. So that slot is going to try and pull one way or another, as they do. So we're just going to crease there and there. We don't really have to worry about the slot part, okay? And then we're just going to crease on all the other lines. Make sure everything's nice and straight. We could have done this earlier. However, I find that doing that stamping that we did is much easier when your page isn't all lumpy and bumpy. Because once you've got all the creases in there, and then of course your page wants to sort of round out, and it's really hard to put a long skinny stamp on something that's bumped up because you're always trying to flatten it and then get your stamp on it, and it's just a little bit arduous, a little bit tedious. So now go into the other side. And all of these are going to be mountain folds. So that means that this was the front facing part of our card. And these are all mountain folds. So they're all going up. When we go to a score line, we're going to push the score line up the mountain from behind. So that creates our mountain fold. I hope that makes sense. Or you can just say you're folding it to the back. Sometimes people can envision that. You're folding your paper to the back. The other thing is that we scored it on the front side, and that creates the dip. And the bump is then on this side. And we always fold with the bump side to the inside. So that's another way to look at it. Okay, so now see how that it would be really difficult to do that stamping once we had done all of our creasing, because you got to keep it down and try and get your stamp on there, and it's just a lot of faffing about. So that's why stamp and decorate first and then do the creasing. Now, if we take a look at this, we've got our slot right here in the center. We've got all of these angles that are coming, and they fold right in together like that and create two rectangular tubes, just like that. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that our two fronts are facing the same way. We've got this, that's the front, and this is the front. We're going to take this piece of paper and stick it down into the slot so that the fronts are still on the same side, okay? And then what we want to do is we want to open this up. So this front side opens up like that. The back side opens down. And what we want to do is fold up the very last piece of 1 1/4 inch. So we're folding it the same way it's folded, and we're going to put adhesive all over it. Now you could use liquid glue if you want. You could use red tape. I'm just using my regular adhesive, but I'm going to put some right at the crease. I'm going to put some right at the cut edge, and I'm going to put some in the middle. Okay, so we're making sure there's a lot of adhesive on there. So again, this is our front that we folded up out of the way. We've got the front of our card poking down into the slot like this. This is folded up and then put adhesive on. Then we take our backings off, or if you're using liquid glue, just hold on a minute. And I like to line this up, usually at the bottom of my Versamat, but I'm going to do it up here. So this is 4 1/4. So from our 6-inch line, we've got 2 1/8. And I'm just doing this so I can center things. You could also do it just by visually centering things, but I'm kind of being a little more particular. So I'm gonna do one of those to hold that down. And then we're gonna take our card and we're gonna line it up right at the bottom in the center. So from the 6-inch line, that looks like the center. So it's going to be lined up right at the bottom and in the middle. And now my fingers are stuck in the adhesive. So I can't get them off. And we're gonna stick that down right like that. Now we're going to add this flap onto there, but there's no adhesive in the center because we've covered it up. So let's add more adhesive just across the front of this panel that we just stuck down. Just like that. And take the backings off. This is one of those trust the process, because you're like, I just decorated that. And now we're sticking it in the middle of a thing. How is this going to work? You got to trust the process. Okay, so now we're going to take this top part. The first little flap, we're going to tuck it in just like we did down here. And then we're just going to fold on that 5-inch line where the slot is. And if we folded everything nicely, it should line up and stick right down. Okay, so we took that top flap, we tucked in the first 1 1/4 inch score, and then we folded it on that 5-inch line, and that made our nice little sandwich where those 2 end pieces of our long 10-inch piece are glued back to back with each other, and our piece in the center is in the center between that sandwich, if you can see that there. Okay, so now when this goes in your envelope, it's going to be like this. When the person receiving the card gets it, hopefully they'll figure it out, you just slide this down. So that's the slide, and this makes the pop out. So then you've got your 2 little rectangular cubes, you've got your lovely stamping here, you've got your nice panel there, there's your front, there's your back. But let's do a little bit more decorating, because we need to add just a little bit more. Now, for those of you who have been following me for a while, you will probably recognize this card from March 2022, and I was looking to see if I could find a video for it, and I couldn't find a video for it, but I have made this base before, and it was when we had in the catalog the game controllers stamp set. And I actually made a card for my son for his birthday that had the game controllers and the eat, sleep, game, repeat and everything. And then it pops up like this, and it was kind of cool. And I couldn't find the video because I was like, oh, I should reference that video. But I couldn't find it. So I will keep looking. And if I do find it, I'll put a link to it somewhere. But it's the same concept, same card, same design, same size, everything. So let's just finish up a little bit of our decorating here. So I'm going to actually slide that up. Slide, slide. There we go. And lay it down. So on this back side, I'm going to come back to the stamp set. And we've got this fun stamp that said Adventures. And then we also have Coming Next. So I want to stamp those out. And I'm going to bring in that piece of white daisy we were using before. We're going to grab our Bluebird ink. I've got Adventures loaded up on my block. We're going to ink it up in Bluebird. I can probably turn this way. Get myself situated here. And stamp Adventures. Actually, I got a little too close to the edge there. That's what happens when you're stamping from a distance, right? There we go. Now I have 2 of them. I can use them for different things. give that a wash off and grab my scissors. And we're going to do some fussy cutting. We're going to fussy cut around our adventures. I'll save that other one and use it for something else. There we go. And we'll come around the corner. I find these shapes are not bad for fussy cutting, but if you're not a fussy cutter, then those dies are available. People kept asking, could we please have dies for the stamps of the month? So they did it. They answered our request. So we've got our adventures. Then let's bring in our candy apple again. Let's see which one's the dark side. This is the dark side. We're going to the dark side. And we're going to stick this on. We're going to do, again, that double matting. Stick that on there like that. Do a little rough cut around it. Actually, I'll do a fussy cut on this side, and then I'll rough cut off the end. Maximizing our paper usage. I always find it's funny when I see videos of people crafting like 5-minute crafts and things like that. I don't know. There's different ones. And especially like kids crafts, and they'll have a whole piece of construction paper and they'll cut something right out of the middle of it. Like, why would you do that? That seems like a waste of paper. But, you know, everybody's got their own way of doing things, right? But I'm always like, maximize the paper. Don't waste the paper. All right. And there we go, all the way around. Ta-da! Are you a maximize the paper kind of person? Let me know in the comments. Do you maximize the paper? Okay, so for our little adventures, I want this to actually stick up a little bit above. And because this is the front panel, we can use some foam tape. And I want it to have a little bit of 3D look to it. So I'm going to add some foam tape just to this side. And I've got my thin foam tape here. I'm going to do it in a couple pieces. Because this is thin, you can actually kind of bend it to follow that curve. And there we go. Take the backing off. So again, because this is not part of the mechanism that has to go inside, we can add that little bit of bump and make it stick up a little bit, make it a little bit more exciting. You just want to check to make sure that your foam tape isn't above the edge there. And then the last stamped image we want is this one that says coming next. And I'm going to bring in my piece of the Limeade cardstock. I'm going to use the Jade for this. Ink it up. I'm going to stamp that. Coming next, I just stuck my finger into my adhesive. My roll of adhesive sitting there. There we go. Fold it down. Don't stick your finger in the adhesive. All right, now this one is such a tiny little piece. I'm just going to fussy cut it out by hand, and I don't really want the colon there. So I'm going to, I'll do it this way. I'm going to just fussy cut a nice little rectangle around the edges of this. Like that. Yep, Heather maximizes her paper. Right, Heather? When somebody else is at a crop and they're like, you know, putting stuff in their recycle bin, and you're like, wait a minute, I could stamp like 10 things on there. Yeah, I'll, if you don't want that, I'll just take that and I'll use it. Yep, I've been there, done that. Let's add some liquid glue on this because it's small. Deborah says she likes to maximize the close to my heart cardstock, not so much the other one. We know which ones we love, right? We gotta, it's like the, what is it, Lord of the Rings, my precious. Don't waste the paper. Yep. Another thing that's good to do is if you've cut some things out like this and you're not sure you're going to use it, you could always use a punch or a die cut and cut out a little circle or something and then just throw it in your scrap bin if you're kind of the person that has a scrap bin. So now I'm going to stick this on here. So we've got our adventures and coming next. There we go. So even your goals could be places you want to go to, things that you want to do. Say there's local places that you've never been. And you're like, oh my gosh, I've lived here for how many years and I've never been there. And yeah. All right, so let's take a look at the front. We need to add just a little bit something else. You know, there's always a little bit something else. So we've got our blue dots, embellishments. Now, again, the caution is, if I can get it open, the caution is you can't put dots where it's going to go through the mechanism because they're just going to take up too much space. So the best thing to do when you want to add dots is to close it down. And now you know that wherever you put them, that's showing, it's safe. They're not going to get bashed around. So let me grab my piercing tool, and in these blue dots, this center row, center section here, I think this was sapphire. These are Bluebird, and then these I believe are periwinkle, maybe. Yeah. So we're gonna, pardon me, add a few little hearts up here on our front. I'm going to just kind of overlap that scalloped edge there. We're going to grab the smaller heart. We're going to do our visual triangle, right? We like to have our triangles. So we'll do 2 there. We'll put 1 over here like that. And then I thought it would be kind of cute down here on this. You could do like little bitty sparkles on there. I didn't get them out, but that's something you could do just to make those little sparkly bits all the more sparkly. And then on this side, let's use these circles, and we'll add a circle here, and the tiny little circle you can add right along the line there. And then this other one, we'll just kind of pop it on over there. And that adds just that little bit of extra something, something, because we need to make it special for ourselves. So there we go. It fits in an envelope. So if you're making this card base for a project for someone else, that's good to know. And then of course it pops up like this, and I think this is a great design for what we did because it can sit on your desk, it can sit on your bedside table, it can sit on your kitchen counter, anywhere you want it to sit, to remind you that the best is yet to come, that beginnings are beautiful, and that we have some goals, maybe a word of the year that we want to follow, and that adventures are coming next. So I hope you guys enjoyed seeing this slider pop out card and how it comes together, and using that January stamp of the month to create a fun reminder of our goals and things that we're working towards. And the stamp set is called Looking Forward, and I think that is a great way to start out January with a lovely project like this, and I hope you enjoyed seeing it come together. Feel inspired to make one for your own, and if you do, be sure to take a photo of it and pop it in the comments once I post the photos of this this item on the Facebook page, and because I would love to see what you create. All right, have a wonderful rest of your morning, and we will be on at 11:30 for our afternoon chat and craft. Will join us there. All right, toodaloo, bye.